Welcome to Mom and Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Welcome to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. In this episode, we are hearing a personal story from Nicole Curran Sanchez. She's going to be talking about her miscarriages and her rainbow baby Cruz. Pregnancy loss and miscarriage are another one of those things that we just don't talk a lot about, but happen more often than people realize. The statistics that we have right now, anyways, state that about 20% of pregnancies end with miscarriage. But that's not the end of the story. There's a lot of emotional pain and anxiety and sometimes depression that come with miscarriage or perinatal loss. It's another one of those times where women and partners can feel really alone. And I'm so honored to have Nicole on to share her story. Nicole was born and raised in Orange County, California, and has lived in Sacramento since 2008. She works at the state capitol as a senior legislative assistant and scheduler to the chair of the Assembly Health Committee. She has worked for the California state elected officials for the past 16 years. She's very active in her community and loves to help people navigate state resources, especially understanding paid family medical leave, Medi-Cal, and other state programs to help the most vulnerable populations, such as homeless, seniors, and children. She's a mom of a wonderful and kind 5-year-old boy named Cruz. He is her rainbow baby. She and her husband Rick are thankful every day for their ray of sunshine. Let's hear from Nicole. Welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're open and willing to share your story with us. So please start wherever you'd like.
Yes, my name is Nicole, and today, in honor of all of the unborn babies who mothers got to hold for one last time or who never got a chance to hold them, I just wanted to honor them, especially today on October 15th for a National Day of Remembrance. So it's really great that we're doing this today. My story is that I've actually had 2 miscarriages, one in February of 2011, and it was a very exciting time in my life because my best friend was expecting as well. And unfortunately, this is more nerve-wracking than I thought it was going to be. This is very hard for me because I didn't even know I was pregnant at the time. I ended up in the emergency room that day because of very high blood pressure. And in the emergency room is where I found out that I was 7 weeks pregnant. Gosh. I felt alone. I felt very scared. It was just a sense of all this anxiety just came to my mind. I didn't know what to do or what to expect. And unfortunately, the doctor in the emergency room treated me like I was just a statistic. Oh, no. And I think through my story here is to try to educate the doctors and hospital professionals and also any mom out there and just know that they're not alone and that they're not just a statistic, that they matter, that our little ones do matter.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, when I was in the emergency room, I was never offered counseling assistance. I was never offered a phone number to call. I was just told that there's going to be some bleeding and there's going to be some clotting and cramping and to go home and take ibuprofen. So when I left the emergency room, I was never given an opportunity to talk about how I felt. And it was already cold to begin with in the emergency room. And this was just the coldest moment in my life. And when I went home that day, it was an extremely amount of pain. I remember my best friend came to the hospital to come and get my car. And my boyfriend at the time, he came, of course, to the hospital to be with me once we found out the news.
Right.
And I go home shaking, scared, and I just wanted to sleep for days.
Yeah.
I experienced a lot of depression and a lot of heartache. I actually gained probably about 40 pounds because of the depression. Yeah. And I never knew exactly that it was being triggered by my miscarriage. I just never talked about it because to me, it was never important enough at that time in my life to focus on it. But I just kept on grieving, and I didn't know exactly why I was grieving.
Right. So nobody really ever talked to you about it, offered support, either in the hospital or through any follow-up or anything like that?
No. And that's the hardest part, is that I have really good insurance. I am a health advocate myself for many patients, and I'm always an advocate for other people. But when it came to myself, I couldn't focus on what was happening to me.
Right.
Even my own primary care doctor, he was just more concerned that I was gaining weight. But
not asking really any questions to find out why or underlying causes or reasons.
Correct.
Right.
And so it wasn't until almost a year later, in April of 2012, we experienced a second loss of a miscarriage. And at that time, we were married, newlyweds. And it wasn't until my second miscarriage is when I realized how much grief I was still grieving from my first miscarriage.
Yeah. How far apart were they again?
The first one was February of 2011, and the second one was April of 2012.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's not a lot of time.
No, it's not a lot of time. And my husband was in Las Vegas for work at that time. And I just remember all of a sudden I started spotting at work, and I got myself an appointment. At first, my own OBGYN wasn't available that day to take me, so I drove to a different facility in order to get checked out. And I just remember praying and singing the song, "You're My Sunshine," over and over again until I got to the hospital.
Yeah.
And when I was driving to the hospital, at this time I was 14 and a half weeks pregnant. And that was the week that I was scheduled to go in and find out if we were having a boy or a girl.
Right.
And so while I'm driving to the hospital, I just kept singing the song over and over again in my head. And even there in the doctor's room, when they couldn't find the heartbeat, I also remember the doctor treating me like a statistic and just reminding me that it's 1 in 4 women will experience miscarriage.
As you're sitting there trying to desperately searching for a heartbeat, this is what he comes with?
Yes, she.
Okay.
And here she was a medical professional. She's experienced this, tons and tons of times before. But to me, I felt as though that I was just being treated as a statistic. And never once was I offered, "Why don't you call this phone number? I'm so sorry for your loss." There was none of that. There was no hand holding during that whole entire time. Once again, I was alone in the doctor's office because my husband was away. And on my way back home, I remember calling my grandmother and telling her what happened. And she is a woman of great faith. And all she did was just pray for me. And when I got home that night, I actually posted something on Facebook in regards to how I was actually feeling. And this is the first time ever that I expressed anything about even my first miscarriage.
Sure, right.
Because the first miscarriage I never really talked about. But the second one, I didn't want to just be a statistic. I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to be a voice for other people who went through the process.
Right.
And my husband, he rushed back home from Las Vegas, and I just remember just crying in his arms all over again, just like the first one. And nobody ever tells you on how much pain that you go through during a miscarriage.
Right.
And a friend of mine, she actually had a couple stillborn losses, and I reached out to her, and I was telling her about how I was feeling. And then she's like, "Well, you should really just talk about how you're feeling to other people." And so that's what I did. I posted something up on Facebook, and then a coworker of mine reached out to me through a private email and shared her experience and everything that she went through. And then before you know it, a high school friend reached out to me and told me her story.
Wow.
And then a grade school friend reached out to me. And so all of a sudden, it was like a domino effect that my sharing of my personal story allowed other moms to speak out about what they went through their miscarriage.
That's incredible.
So it was very touching that a lot of people reached out to me afterwards, and I'm very, very thankful for their kindness. And afterwards, I no longer have that OBGYN,
right?
But I did reach out to her, and I shared my Facebook post with her. And I just reminded her that the next time a woman comes in and is in the same situation as I am, that she should be a little less callous and actually make sure she's okay before leaving her office.
Good for you. That's awesome.
And so I ended up getting a new provider. And then like a few weeks went by, and my husband didn't want to let me slip into a major depression like I was in the first one. Mm-hmm. And so we went to the animal shelter, the local animal shelter, and we were going in for a new cat, but we ended up with a scrawny, ugly-looking dog, and his name is Chewy. And it's kind of funny because Chewy, he's our rescue dog, but he's the one who actually rescued me because I was going to go into another deep, deep, deep depression again. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because Chewy literally was an ugly dog. Mm-hmm. He was mad at, the next day was the day that he was going to be euthanized. And he has crooked teeth and he was dirty and ugly. And that's how I was feeling. And that's the dog that we came home with. And it's kind of funny because Chewy still till this day, he and I have this bond between us because I know it was him that helped me not go through the major depression that I first went through.
That's beautiful.
And, and so a year goes by, and then we get exciting news again that I was pregnant. And this time during my pregnancy, any little bit of scare, any little bit of hiccup that sounded weird, I would go to the emergency room, or I would go and ask for an ultrasound, or I wanted to hear the baby's heartbeat because I was on edge through everything. I didn't even
really anxious.
I was just anxious. Mm-hmm. Like everything that you were not supposed to eat on the list, I didn't even think about touching it. Mm-hmm. I drank nothing but water. I gave up caffeine. It was just all this anxiety that would just go through, being pregnant for a third time.
Right. Anxiety about having another loss specifically.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't actually until Cruz, my son, I was going through labor. I had 38 hours of labor with him.
Wow.
And 4 hours of pushing. I had an allergic reaction to the epidural.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't until one of my labor nurses during delivery told me that I was about to deliver my rainbow baby. And to me, I never heard that term before. I didn't know exactly what a rainbow baby was, and she explained it to me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is true. And so through my rainbow baby, I now have a 5-year-old. He's amazing. And he's my everything.
Yeah.
But he's definitely in the center of my life. And back to that crazy old dog, he knew I was pregnant before I knew I was pregnant with Cruz. He would always lay on my belly while I was sitting there on the sofa. And I hadn't even missed my period yet. Mm-hmm. And he would I'm like, you know what? This is kind of weird. This is kind of strange. He's too clingy right now. And sure enough, I go upstairs and I take the pregnancy test, and we found out we were pregnant.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so if you're out there and you're listening, definitely go get yourself a rescue dog.
Right.
They'll bring you some good luck.
That's amazing. Wow, you've been through so much with both of the losses, not really getting the help that you needed on multiple levels, it sounds like. And, the anxiety that you described, I imagine that was present for the second pregnancy as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You felt anxious the whole time for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But more so on the third.
More so on the third. Absolutely. Right. So you've been through these 2 losses. And, kind of just to go back a little bit, the providers that you had didn't have resources and or didn't know how to support you. through the loss. And when you were describing that feeling of cold, cold in that room, I imagined that you were talking about emotionally cold and distant. And just, I think you also used the word callous. I'm not sure, but
yes,
that there was just a void of kind of having any feeling for what you might be going through.
Yes, it was a void of empathy, the lack of care, the lack of, it's already, you're in an emergency room and they're trying to get people in and out of, the hospital. But it just would have been nice for somebody to come in and talk to you and make sure that you're going home and that you're going to be safe and that you're going to be okay. I just wanted somebody to tell me that I was going to be okay. Right. And that I wasn't alone. And luckily now, during my time with Cruz, I started reaching out to other moms through Facebook. And there's a lot of nonprofits out there. And there's also a lot of Facebook groups out there. And so I joined a lot of them. And I would just be that person sending a hug from California to another grieving mom in Minnesota. Yeah. And just letting her know that she's not alone. And it was really nice just to be able to reach out to other moms. And here in my city, in West Sacramento, we have a West Sacramento Mommies group. And through that group is where I met a lot of my close and dear friends. And we've all gone through a lot. And it's always nice when other moms reach out to other moms for their own support.
Right.
And a friend of mine, she had a loss and another friend had a loss. And so there was a lot of us who were in the same boat, but all just at different periods of time in our lives. And we all talked a lot about it.
Right.
So it was just a nice supportive network that we all provided for one another. And in my opinion, it just would have been nice if it would have been within the medical community.
Hi, I'm Kate.
And I'm Liz.
And we host the Mom Deconstructed podcast. We interview moms to find out the real story of their mothering journey. Motherhood is the most difficult job there is, but unless we allow ourselves to create community and accept the help of others, it can be a very lonely endeavor.
Let's get beyond the superficial, delve into the dreams that inspire us, the struggles that test us, and the conversations that connect us. You can listen to Mom Deconstructed anywhere you get your podcasts, from the Parents on Demand Network and at momdeconstructed.com.
Right. That they could have offered you that resource or led you to it?
Yes.
Right. I mean, it sounds like in all of the places you felt so far, anyways, that I've heard that you felt really supported and heard and understood is when you had that support from other moms or other people going through similar situations.
Right.
Yeah. So clearly having that social support, the mom-to-mom support was very, very helpful. Was there anything else that helped you through this process?
I would think that it had a lot to do with me trying to not get to where I was after my first one and just me pushing myself because I finally realized what was happening to me on why I was so sad and why my heart was aching so much. And then a mom in my support group was talking about, well, why don't you name them and put whatever keepsakes that you have in a box somewhere. And this is my advice that I have to other moms who go through the same experience, is to name them. You don't even have to share what their, names are or where your keepsake box is, just as long as you know.
Right.
And whatever you have, if it's an ultrasound picture or if it was just you taking a picture of your belly, just to have a keepsake box and just make it private. And then honor your loved one the day of your losses or when their birthdays would have been. And that's what my husband and I choose to do is, we name them, and then in my life right now, Cruz is an only child. I'm now 41. And that's the hardest part for me is because I never thought I would just have one child. But whenever somebody ever asked me, oh, you only have one? I'm like, no, I have two. I had 2 miscarriages before Cruz, and it's always a statement about who I am.
Yeah.
And no matter who, if I'm talking to somebody in a grocery store, if I'm talking to another mom in his kindergarten class, when we talk about my family, I always talked about my 2 little ones that went before us. And so it's just important because then you let other people know that it's not just an only child.
Right. It sounds like you said that you and your husband chose to name them. And so you guys talked about this and decided what you wanted to do together?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And that's great. I'm so glad too, because I'm glad you're kind of speaking to that, because I think sometimes the dads or the spouses are left out of this conversation, and it's nice to know that he was involved and supportive.
Yes, I think he's the one who took the initiative after the second one, because he also went through the grieving process.
Sure.
And he didn't tell me until later, but when he was leaving Las Vegas, he went into shock mode and just started crying with one of his coworkers there in Vegas. And he comes back to Sacramento, and then it's having to cry all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice having him as a support person in my life and holding me up when I was at my darkest hour.
Right. Yeah, that's great, because it's a family. It affects the whole family. Whoever knows about it or is invested in you guys, it's going to be affecting people to some extent. And having been through what you went through with the first miscarriage, the depression afterwards, I'm sure, there's a lot of concern, like you said, for that happening again, for the depression to come again. And that, you guys are a family, and absolutely anything that affects one of you affects all of you, especially something that deep. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm so glad you brought your husband into our discussion today. Obviously, he's very involved with you. But we don't talk about dads often enough, or partners often enough. I was thinking a little bit about your experience of the depression after the first miscarriage. And later on, it sounds like you figured out that it was connected to the loss. But during it was hard to tell, right?
Yes, it was. Because I didn't know if it was because of, just everyday life on why I was going through what I was going through.
Right.
If it had to do with in the anticipation of getting married, like married jitters, or I didn't know exactly where it was at. And looking back at it all, it had everything to do with my first loss. And back to my husband, with his support role, dads go through their own emotional roller coaster ride with this too. I remember one of his close friends, they had a loss a couple years ago, and he instantly told, one of his best friends, you have to have your wife reach out to my wife. And sure enough, and then we all grieved together. And nowadays, you could just go onto the internet through Etsy or, some type of card making class. And there's even all these special gifts. There's even keepsake boxes that you could buy online for a loved one who, is grieving. Right. And so I have cards at home so that if anything does happen again, that I'm able to be there for a friend, and that I'm able to share my experiences with them too, in order to try to help them through their process.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's incredibly thoughtful that you're just like ready to go to support someone. And I think one of the main ways I hear people doing that is really through their own experience. And we get, if we're going through something that's devastating and heartbreaking, that's when our eyes are opened to really how hard this is. And through your own healing and your own process, being able to give that support to somebody else, I'm sure is just so beneficial to them. And, how does that feel for you to be able to give support from that place?
Well, it helps me out a lot too, to be there for somebody else. In my nature of work that I do, I help out a lot of people. And so it's just part of my nature of being that extra helper out there to try to make the world a better place. Yeah. But Facebook networks, especially, being able to reach across the country to somebody, in some little small town in Arkansas or some little small town in Maine who may not have the same resources that we have in California. It's nice just to be able to share what I went through with somebody else. So that was important to me. Like, I remember my husband would joke with me at who are you on Facebook with right now? Who are you talking to? And it's like 2:00 in the morning. And I tell him, I leaned over and I was like, I'm trying to be there for another mom. And he's like, you were just on with somebody last night. And I'm like, it's one person at a time. And it was just all of a sudden, I just started reaching out to somebody would post something. I just, lost my baby, or I just found out I had a miscarriage, or, I just gave birth to my unborn baby. And I would just reach out to them constantly. Now there's even walks that, down in Orange County for Day of Remembrance, just even reaching out to the moms and the dads through that group was helpful. It's a really nice feeling just to make sure that people don't feel that they're alone, so that they don't have to feel cold and lonely.
And it sounds like it's a continued support for you too, and maybe even healing for you to be able to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Very cool.
Even in my work here on what I do is just trying to advocate for other moms, so that when I'm in a meeting with medical professionals, I'm always having to remind them people experience different things in different ways. And just because you think that they're going to be okay doesn't mean that they are going to be okay.
Right. So
and
you're like an advocate now too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Once you go through something like that and then your eyes are opened to this world and this experience, it sounds like it became really important for you to be able to try and open other people's eyes to it also.
Yes, it did.
That's fantastic. And now you're continuing to do the work that you do and advocate for moms and families and be the mom to your son, Cruz. And what else would you like to share about your experience?
Well, it's kind of interesting because even during my labor process with Cruz, I was so scared. I was so scared of losing him or even losing myself. I had 36 hours of labor. And by the last, I'd say 5 hours, I was begging for a C-section. And they just would not give me a C-section. I was to the point of just pure exhaustion. And because of my allergic reaction to the epidural, they were giving me medicine in the hospital in order to counteract it.
All
so
right.
It was delaying the process.
Yeah.
So according to them, I was fine and the baby was fine. But to me, emotionally, I was in the process of just giving up because I just wanted him to be safe.
Right.
And so interesting on how, just looking back at my labor experience, on how much I had to try to advocate for myself. And later on, I ended up not needing a C-section. I held him in my arms. I did not want to let go.
Yeah.
I took one look at him, and my mom was present, and my husband, of course, was present. And my husband was just sobbing and crying because he was finally here.
Yeah,
He was just so emotionally involved with it all.
Right.
And my mom, I blacked out after my final push because I ended up developing this really horrible migraine.
Oh, gosh.
And so my mom was the one with the baby during the cleanup time and, weighing and how long he is and all that kind of stuff. And then my husband was in the bathroom crying.
Yeah.
Because he just couldn't believe that he finally had a son.
Right.
That was finally here.
Right.
So it goes back to, what you were talking about, your spouse being in a support role as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there is that emotional connection that dads do have with the pregnancy. Absolutely. And losses along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and also it's like, I can imagine it being such a relief to having gone through what you guys went through, waiting all this time, having all of this anxiety, and then there he finally is. And I think there's some part of us that when those types of situations happen, you can finally let go, and or you're just so overcome with emotion that they just come, and that's totally fine and normal. And yeah, I mean, these are very intense situations. And there's a lot of emotional stuff. Sometimes we can't even put our fingers on it, It's just happening. And then what a beautiful testament to how, his involvement in also to your journey together.
Yes.
Yeah. So considering your journey and all that you've been through, do you have any hopeful messages or things you'd like for moms and families to know?
Yeah, sure. Just like I tell my son every day, families come in all different shapes and sizes. Some families have a family of 3. Some families have a family of 7. My son goes to a Catholic school, so the average number of kids in his family is about 4.
Yeah.
And it's just trying to teach him that all families are different. Some families end up adopting a little one out of foster care, and that's a family. That's a family of love. You may only have that one opportunity to say goodbye to your loved one as you last hold them one last time before you have to say goodbye. That is your family. Families grieve, families love, and it's just a process that you have together. I think a lot of times people, they put too much of a rush. Oh, you're 26 years old. You're not married yet. You're not a mom yet. Why are you waiting too long? How many kids do you have? There's too many questions. But what people don't realize is that it's a personal story between you and your own family.
Right.
And just don't let anybody make you feel that you're a statistic. Just like with me, I learned that I'm not just a statistic. I'm a mom. I was a mom that had to let go.
Yeah.
And through time, I was able to understand what I went through. And now with my son, Cruz, he's my rainbow baby, and he's my ray of sunshine.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be a party of 3.
Yeah.
So I think if I had to give any bit of advice for somebody who's gone through this, is reach into your own heart and hold your little one close. And that's all that you can do.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily grieve alone. Reach out to family, reach out to friends, reach out to, clergy or of your own faith, and just let others be there for you. Because in this world that we live in, especially in today's world, it may seem a little ugly out there, but there really are good people out there who can be there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That was beautiful, Nicole. Thank you so much for your words.
I'm crying.
Oh, I know. I appreciate your vulnerability here with us and sharing all of this. I just know that just as you found out, once you put your story out there, you got so many people reaching out to you with their own stories. And I know that you sharing now is also going to have that same impact, that someone out there is really going to be able to identify with what you're saying and feel held and feel heard and seen, and know that they have the right to feel however they need to feel. And that, despite having a sort of a cold experience with medical providers, that their experience is valid and that they have every right to seek out help and support and get the healing that you found as well. So I appreciate you so much, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you, Nicole, for sharing your experience and letting us hear what it's like to go through this and find healing. And what I hear so often from mothers who've experienced loss is that it feels sometimes impossible to understand how you're going to get through something. And when we hear that other people are able to get through it and find their meaning in other ways or through their other children, it really does and can give hope to the mom who's suffering. So thank you, Nicole. If this is your first time with us on the Mom and Mind podcast, please check us out wherever you listen to podcasts. We're all over the place. You can find links to most listening platforms at momandmind.com. We'd love to have you come join us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And as usual, we thank you so much for being with us today. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.